Morning, Nicole.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg, Avignoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World Collective Energy Share and whatever else that is. Consciousness discussion, whatever.
Right.
I just realized, look, we coordinate this morning color-wise.
Wow.
Look at that. So where to start is always the question, right?
Right. Yeah, and I always try to think back how we started our conversations Friday that led us to where we are today. And it's like, it's just gone.
I know, because it's like a whole month's worth of stuff always gets packed into a weekend kind of thing.
It's just gone.
Well, we can start with what's very interesting. One of the things that came up, and I think we talked about it a little bit last week. What was our topic last week? Well, I think we talked a little bit, because I know we talked a little last week about the lines. Oh, that's what it was, the lines, going past the lines, right?
Oh, yeah, taking that extra step.
Right. Good morning, Sarah. Check your computer. She said she can't get sound ideas. Check your computer or phone. Make sure your sound is turned on or up. Good morning, Yasmin and Nicole and Gloria. So last week we were talking about lines and going past the line and pushing ourselves past the line, right? And then on Thursday, I talked a little bit on in my Living the Shift podcast, which is funny. I always cross-reference both of them because they're both always related.
Right.
And talked about, in there came the idea of humanity being a line, right? And I can't remember I don't even remember what my context was of last Thursday, but I remember that came up because I was like, how did we missed that Monday? And then it sort of came up in the context on Thursday. And that we believe that, when we're incarnate, that we are limited by our humanity, right? That this is our whole being because of what we do or don't remember.
Right.
Right.
And we talked about who are us as humans, mere humans, to change any of the rules.
Right. Because we've convinced ourselves, to go back to our first discussion about the house arrest thing in December, before any of this ever happened, it had to do with believing that for some reason we were being punished by being here. Like this was a punishment to be incarnate, to be on earth, that we're limited, we're on house arrest, because we believe that our physical bodies as humans are limited and that we're only allowed to do so much. And the thing has been that ties us all together. The thing that you're gonna have to call the phone thing, the comments, because my phone is over here.
Yeah, Sarah's still having trouble with her. She's in Facebook and there's no Zoom link, so there's no button. Trying to think, maybe if you click on the pictures.
Oh, well, if there's no sound, she can't hear us.
That's true.
Anyway, she'll figure it out, or she'll get the replay. I don't. There's it's usually the individual's phone or computer or whatever, the sound isn't on or the setting is off or whatever. Anyhow, so we believe that, so this ties a lot of things together, because we were talking about that house arrest thing, that we believe that we're being punished to be humans, that we're only allowed to go so far, that that we are less than because we're incarnate. And then because of the density that we've come into forgetting that this, we think this is the entirety of our consciousness, when it is just such a tiny little piece of our consciousness. And that's even just individual souls, and then going into, collectives and, the concentricity of everything, right? So we have convinced ourselves that it is a sin, and it is a bad thing and against the rules to cross the line of what we believe the definitions of humanity are, right?
Right.
And so we believe that is punishable. I think this is how we led into the conversation on Friday.
Right.
That's
right.
And and we believe it's punishable because, and that was something we talked about on retreat, in Shasta with the group. And because we had punishment coming up, right? We had
Right.
blisters, we had cuts, we
Cuts
had back problems and neck
and
problems and
headaches
headaches and all kind of stuff, right?
and financial issues.
Financial, yeah, right, financial stuff. So we believe, so we had punishments, so we all worked through that part of it, but yet we've like, because it's all about like the message we got there, it's all about completion of a cycle. We're all to complete the cycle and move on. And it's like we have to move past that old line. And we
Right.
believed, and so the biggest thing for us in resolution is going past that going past that line, which we talked about the lines last week. But the humanity thing is really big, and not just humanity, but the earth rules, right? Or
Right.
the rules of earth and the dimensions here and how we've structured them and all that kind of stuff. And so what we got, and the other topic that we wanted to talk about today that we talked about in retreat in Shasta had to do with attraction and repulsion. Nicole says it's gotten to the point that we punish ourselves rather than release the belief system holding us back. Well, that's the thing.
Right.
That's the thing, is that we're like, oh no, I'll just take the punishment because I deserve it because I broke the rules, right?
Right.
Instead of saying, no, I created the rules, I can change it.
Okay, Sarah's got her sound working.
Okay, good. So like we created it, we can change it, right? So now it's time to complete the old cycle of the old structures that we had and move past it. And to do that is for us to let ourselves move forward without punishment.
Right.
Right. And so one of the things that came up was we had this whole, and I'm trying to remember how we connected it together because it was really big, that we talked about in Shasta, was the how the entire universe as we know it from the human perspective is built on attraction and repulsion,
Right.
on this friction, right? Attraction and repulsion, and then there's this line, in the middle that's like the friction layer, right?
Right.
And then what we got to talking about is, well, what if that friction layer is all that Earth is built on, which is, sort of true.
And that's our mode of propulsion.
Yeah.
It propels us to do something, to take action, to be something, to even shift energetically. It is, if you're uncomfortable, it propels you to do something different. Just like, the human body, if it's in pain, it propels you to do something different or to stop doing what you're doing. And we've used that as our tool for creation.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because one of the things that came to me in Shasta was, this whole thing about twin flames that people talk about. And it's like, well, isn't that as one of the biggest attraction repulsions of the entire creation,
exactly.
Right? And not just Earth. I mean, I'm talking about like in duality, and part of it has to do with like a lot of times, especially from this perspective, when we incarnate here together, typically the game is a very heavy attraction repulsion.
Right. Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
It's like a magnet.
It's either perfect or a nightmare.
Right.
Perfect or a nightmare.
Oh, on any given hour.
Nightmare or perfect.
Right. Any given hour.
Right. Or minute.
Or minute. So, and I think it's funny, I was like, oh, well, that shows a lot, because I've had a lot of people that ask me about that. And it's like, well, because we romanticize it, and but it's like, no, because it's something completely different than what we define in our relationships.
Right.
But it's almost a representative, like when you look at it from that big perspective, it's like almost that full representative of that's how we set up ourselves, right? If the twin flame is part of ourself, is the other part of ourself that we split up, then it's like this attraction repulsion that we can, so that we constantly create friction that keeps us in a physicality that keeps us present here on Earth. What if we created Earth to be that presence of that friction, like to be the dimension of that friction that causes the reality that we have? Then you sit back and you go, oh my goodness, that's just a lot, right? to try to swallow. Because then it's like, okay, so then that means, and so what we were talking about in Shasta was, all right, well, it's time to, what if we got rid of that line of friction, not looking at that Earth was created in that line of friction, right?
Exactly.
We were looking at what if we got rid of the lines, and everything we kept on seeing was time to erase the lines, right? In between. And I think back in like March, when we had our little mini conclave, and we did the work about removing the doors between dimensions.
Right.
There's a line, there are lines there. Like there's a lot of stuff that we've been removing. We're removing a lot of things that cause these strict duality based separations. And we were getting to the point of saying, okay, so now it's time to remove the friction line. And then the response of the collective is, what?
Right. Right.
Because that means this is over.
Right. Because we even came to the point where we looked at it as if we remove that line of friction, what's the need to ever create anything different? Because we then have literally access to everything, and it removes that need to even create because you already have everything.
Yeah.
And we talked about judgment contributing to that line of friction.
Well, it's part of it, right?
Because
that's why it is
you're judging something as being good, bad, repulsive, attractive. It's all that judgment.
And it was the experience of us. It's the experience of us actually getting to a place of realizing that most of what we're motivated in these physical bodies has to do with friction, because we're talking about it, right? Earth in birthing, right?
Right.
Birthing itself. How did Earth, get birthed? Had to do with friction, right? Volcanic eruptions, weather stuff, like da 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 da. Like we can go down the list.
Right.
Then we come into and it's really funny because if you even look at the biblical things that talk about, like how it was created, right?
Right.
And then what was it you brought up when we were talking?
Well, we talked about the Garden of Eden and how they were kicked out because they got the knowledge of good and evil.
Right. And I said, well, what if we change the word of knowledge to had the creation of good and evil, right?
Right.
Because the creation of good and evil had to do with duality and creating duality. Because before that, everything was all just creation and beautiful and perfect.
And all just there.
Right. And as soon as we created the knowledge of good and evil, that means created the thought that there is a good and evil.
Right.
Then we had to
introduce the original judgment.
Right.
Yeah. Nicole says, what if we looked at it more as messaging to relax instead of friction?
I don't understand that question.
I think it came in a little bit back, so it may have been when we were talking about the attraction repulsion.
Yeah, I don't understand. Nicole, you'd have to, I guess, explain more of what the question is. Messaging to relax instead of friction. Well, the thing is that the way we've have been created has to do, look at how we are motivated to do something is creating friction in our lives, right?
Right.
That's been the whole thing is, why do we have to be propelled by friction? Why do we have to be propelled against something, right? Repulsed from it,
right?
Or attracted to it, right?
Right.
To cause us to be motivated to do something. Well, motivation in itself implies lack.
Right. Or need.
Right. Right. So the thing is, for us to resolve this, massaging to relax instead of, okay. Yeah, I don't have my reading glasses on. Massaging.
Oh yeah, it is. She did say massaging. I read it as messages.
So the thing is, it's time to shift that, right? And maybe it is softening that idea or changing what that creates, or recognizing, the remembering. Yeah, massage is friction that releases tension.
Right.
Right, but that's also it's also propelled by friction.
Right. Yeah. It's still, again, addressing the tension, not just totally getting rid of it.
Right. So the thing is, and so we have had, because we recognize in this completion that it's time to change that genetic makeup, to the earth as we've created it so that we can shift it to something else. And to do that means to actually pull out the rug and change the foundation of what we create here. And if we do, like, we have a lot of people like asking about, and oh, that's what I was talking about on Thursday. We had a lot of people asking about the earth ending.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Oh, so-and-so said it was going to be 10 months. This person said this. This person said this. This person said the earth's going to get reset, any day now, all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay. So we've gotten so lost in decorating and the interest of the mind, right? Which
Right.
we've talked about, you and I have talked about so much throughout this entire, last 7 months, right? About conspiracy stuff and how people no matter what it is, right? Whether it's the news that's totally making stuff up or exaggerating to such an extreme, or getting into mind control and what the government's doing and what the elite's doing, or the Illuminati, or whatever you want to call it, or the Anunnaki. I mean, you can call it anything you want, or you can be worried about the earth ending tomorrow, or you can come to the presence of when it's complete, it's complete.
Right.
And this ties also together the idea of death, right? And how we've talked about how it's not to fear death, but simply to know that means completion and graduation.
Right.
So that doesn't just have
and it's
to
almost like that's the goal.
Right. Well, it is the goal. Right?
Versus running the other direction.
Right. I mean, so the goal is for us to complete the project, this piece of the project, and move on to the next project, the next part of it, or whatever. But we got to let go to do that. So so many of us are going through these things about, Gloria says, I've heard for many years the earth is ending, and so far here we are. Yeah,
Right, exactly. Or first it was 2000.
Or we've reset 4 million times and we just forget every time.
Right, right. All of which are true.
All of which are true. So, and my feeling is that we're just completing all the little pieces and parts. And when we finally get done with that, the biggest thing for us to face is there will be a time to let go of humanity. There will be a time to let go of the earth and let go of what we've created so that we can move into what's the next creation, because it will become a part of the next creation, like a seed. Right. And then we expound into a completely different territory. So when we talk about it that way, it's like, oh, well, that sounds beautiful. Like, that sounds like a beautiful flower.
Right.
Except we're terrified to let go of the idea of earth. Right.
Right.
So, but the thing is, if we come to this place truly of saying, we're done with the friction, the repulsion and attraction, we're done with that whole, friction creation, then how about, we just say, oh, well, then we're done. That means we can get to the next part of the project now. Great.
Right.
And then it's like, well, okay. And then the ego goes, wait.
Well, let me understand that better.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. wait, explain that. So right. It's not to fear the earth blowing up, because just like us in our physical incarnations, when we're done with the set of lessons we chose to have here in this physical body for this particular part of our note, that it's time for us to move on to the next one, then we leave and we depart, whether we're 5 minutes old, 5 years old, 5 decades old, or whatever. What?
It's funny thinking about if this is just one note, look at how long we've been holding this one note.
I know. Gotta take a breath.
It's like, take a breath and move to the next note.
You got that down, honey. Move on.
You're perfectly in tune.
That's
Let's
right.
move on.
Perfect. Oh, yeah. So the thing is, and we're coming to that. And what if we allowed ourselves to do that, right? And so what I think is funny is we did a bunch of stuff as a group collectively and with the collective in Shasta in our retreat about that. removing the line. I guess we didn't really look at Earth being in the line itself, right?
Right. I think we looked at it personally.
But then goes to show you how we've come back or come forward, right? And then we've had like like different people have had hives, rashes.
Right. Rashes.
You know, my cat's doing the itchy thing, like he's taking it on for me, which I'm like, no. And then I got literally bit in the ass yesterday. I'm sitting on a very soft
you
blanket.
can't ignore that.
Yeah, I know. I don't even know what bit me. Like it's a huge welt, so it must be, I don't know. I just sat on a brick step. It was weird. Anyway, but like, and it's not just us that were there in Shasta, because of course it's a collective thing that we're all in agreement of doing. And so, yeah, and also car problems, right? Because I had my whole family going with the car stuff while I was away, right? You
Right.
know, people who've having car, I mean, just car,
And outrageous, like who would have ever thought?
Right.
Car problems.
Right. And it's like, so the thing, and cars are about moving forward.
Right.
Moving beyond.
Right. And I had the bottom of my feet swell the other night. And it's like,
I know you said that and I was like, wow.
how did the bottom of your feet swell?
Right.
But mine did. And it was like, okay, it's moving forward. What am I afraid of moving forward?
Right. Right.
Why am I trying to hold myself back?
Right. And so it's like, that's sort of looking at like, what if it's time for us to get to the point of death? And I'm not talking about individual, I'm talking about collectively, right? Or the way that we've had it.
Right.
Right. And the ego hears that and goes, what did you just say? But it's like, but at some point, every time we iterate, right? Every time we live here, incarnate, we get to a point of death where it's important for us to come to this acceptance, right? And I'm not saying that it's tomorrow or next week or next year, but it's probably imminent at some point soon.
Right. Well, and you know, that brings me back to that quote from, I watched Wall-E yesterday again. I love that movie. The messages are so timeless for right now. And the captain says, I don't want to just survive. I want to live. And I feel like we've hunkered down into survival mode, believing that is living.
Right.
And that if we actually start living, even if that means death to this physical body, it's really living. And again, it's opposite world.
Right.
It's opposite world. It's the opposite of what you think.
Yes. Yeah.
And the more you let go and the more you just send love in instead of judgment, it shifts mountains. And if you're always looking for a problem or something to solve or something to fix, you'll always find something.
Right.
But Absolutely. If you stop and just push that love to it, I mean, it doesn't even look the same anymore.
No. What if we go today? What if we go tomorrow? Yeah. And all this stuff. And it's when we do that and we start taking away the energy also of being afraid. So Nicole says the fun thing is to think about the friction of
as fear
and learn. Yeah, I'm sorry. It says
lean in and out of curiosity. What is this teaching me? What can I learn?
Yeah.
And again, but if you're always looking for what you can learn, you'll always find something. If you're saying, I already know, I already remember. Right. I've got this.
And when we start taking the word learn out of our vocabulary and replace it with remember, right?
Right.
What is there
I know what to do.
Right. And that's sort of what I've been doing. And you and I have been doing and it's like, okay, I'm just going to remember the resolution of this and how to move forward beyond it
and trust it.
Trust is the big thing.
Right.
Right.
And trust doesn't happen when there's judgment.
No, because you can't, because there's friction in the judgment, and trust, there isn't any.
Right.
There's just the acceptance. So Gloria says, what would you say headaches signify? Well, there's been a lot of those going on too. Um, and I think headaches have to do with resistance to looking at this too.
Right, which I know hives do, rashes do. I mean, probably most of the things that are physically going on right now is your body's way of getting your attention to say, refocus,
Right.
remember.
Well, it's your higher self saying in your body going, hey, 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 and
Right.
and it was really funny.
Maybe thunking you in the head.
Or biting you in the ass.
Right, right.
I'm like, wow, that was rude. That was me yesterday to my higher self.
Right.
That was rude. But yeah, and it's like, stop. What are you doing? Why are you getting stressed and having anxiety? And be present. You've got this. Because
Right.
it's just remembering what to do. Just do it. Don't even remember how to do it, because how is the details. And it's just like, let's do this, right?
Right.
And when I started focusing on that, that's when the anxiety started to really subside. Yeah.
Yeah, Sarah said she had a 3-day migraine till last night.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. Even if you're not thinking, because even my daughter, who she hasn't had a migraine, or my youngest hasn't had a migraine, thanks to the CBD she's been taking. She hasn't had and she's been doing energy, not energy. She's been moving a lot more and stuff. But she had a headache that lasted like a couple of days also. And it was right after I came home. And it's like, it's that energy of that moving forward, right? So you can see
Right.
it all.
Right.
You can see it all. And when you step back and you don't blame yourself, like by saying, oh God, I can't believe I brought this on to my cat, to my kid, to whatever, it's like, no,
Right.
everybody signed up for us to do it together. And we all have different parts
they're
of it.
you.
Right.
They're
Exactly.
me.
Exactly.
Right. So why would you treat yourself with anything other than love?
Right. So the key is, yeah, and so going back to the punishment, like we believe that, oh my God, what if we say we are complete? What if we say that we've completed this? Then that means it's time to like, let her blow, right?
Right. And it doesn't mean just saying it. It means living it.
And knowing it.
Right. Living it as if it is already complete.
Yeah.
Living it, knowing it, being it. I mean, it's a whole different energy. And I mean, your body just almost turns to jelly.
Yeah.
When you get to that place, because it's like, oh, I know how to do this.
Right.
So there's no friction, there's no struggle, right. There's no suffering. I know this.
Right. And so that's I think our biggest step is getting beyond the self-judgment and the collective judgment of, I'm not allowed to step past this. Who am I to hit the self-destruct button?
Right.
For the earth. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Who am I? Like, because look at how much over the years you and I have talked about the guilt for creating this.
Right.
Right. And if you look at it from that perspective, right, the guilt for creating this density, the guilt for creating an entire real civilization and set of dimensions based in friction, right? Yeah, so Sarah says, I've got several major stressors, keep knowing I'm just fine and all's happening, and thinking the only difference between misery and bliss is the thought and feelings in my circumstance, in any circumstances. And I'm having unhelpful thoughts alternating with comfort knowingness thoughts. Well, that's just practice.
Right.
And being observant to those thoughts, because I mean, I had them all weekend.
That and then being forgiving of yourself for having those thoughts.
Exactly.
Which I think that's we get drawn into our own self-judgment, which just reinforces judgment of others.
Yeah. So this is a biggie. Like this is so much bigger than a bread box. And so it's for us to really say, okay, I mean, have we ever faced that? Like we sit there and we're like, I mean, I look at so many people out there in the spiritual community saying, oh, it's time to save the world. And it's like, but what if we're not here to save the world? What if we're here to complete it?
Right.
That changes the entire energy of it.
Or what if saving the world looks completely different than what you think it looks like?
Exactly.
What if it looks like saving yourself from the perspective of getting to that place where you erase all those friction lines to where even at the cell level, you just turn into a puddle of liquid on the floor.
And that's it.
And that's it. And you're done.
And that would be so freeing because we put so much energy into all of that. We have what, 2 to 3 trillion cells in our bodies in any given moment, right? And so think of all the energy that we're creating in friction to hold it together.
Right.
Like it makes me think of Lucy, the movie
Right.
Lucy, with her hands starting to come across, right?
Right.
And so Gloria says, Sarah, I'm there now and find scary. Sarah Mertz. Yeah, it is what do you find scary about it, Gloria? The thoughts that come in that are not the blissful ones, you know, the thing is to not judge them, right? But that's the whole thing, is like, okay, so what if that is what we're here to do, right? So what if we're here to really allow it to be done? What if we're the closers? We were the openers. We came here to open, and we're here at the close.
Yeah, we're the cleanup crew right now.
Yeah. Which, you know, and so the more we talk about this openly, but it's funny, like I said, I see more and more people like, oh, like we've got to save the world. It's like, but it's more Band-Aids. You know, it's more like we need to fix this and we need to fix that. And what, you know, I got early on in my conscious spiritual journey was there's nothing to fix. It's all perfect.
Right.
It's what is there to remember? What is there to complete and resolve and complete so that we do shift forward into something else. And that's really letting go. Can we let go of the whole earth experience?
Right. At the same time, letting go of ourselves.
Yeah.
To allow who we really are to be there.
Yeah. So Gloria said that I could do something to hurt myself, which I definitely do not want. Well,
but the self-judgment is probably hurting yourself.
Yeah.
More than anything else you're doing.
Yeah, the criticism and judgment on what you're thinking of and all that kind of stuff. That's where the acceptance of our shadow side comes in. That's the acceptance of the whole.
Right.
Right. It was funny because we were talking about that. I was talking about that this weekend. What was it in reference to? I think it was in my Kung Fu class. I can't remember. Just like sort of there. It was something that was really related, had to do with the shadow self. So I have had, from my memory, many, many lifetimes where I chose to have painful, suffering-based deaths.
Right.
Very creative. But the funny part is when I look at them now, like, of course, yeah, there was the moments of pain, but then I say, oh, that's pretty creative. Like, in fact, I came to a point where I started laughing about that, right? So when you look at it in that perspective and you're looking at it without emotion or without judgment, you're like, oh, look at how I created that. Look at how I created that because I believed I deserved to be punished. And we have been so creative on punishing and friction, you know, that friction is punishment, right? And the whole knowledge of good and evil and, you know, the creation of good and evil and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And it's like, but in the reality, in whatever is what we call reality, because reality is an ego-based word anyway, in creation, it all exists and it all exists and none of it exists, right? So you can, so I mean, not that I'm not condoning anybody to kill themselves or whatever, but the thing is, why is one thing worse than the other? Right? So the thing is to recognize that coming to that place of centeredness and presence and acceptance and trust, right, is the what do I do? What is there for me to do now? And like, and you know, you have the dark thoughts. We have collectively the darkness from the friction that we've created right here at the surface right now.
Right.
So much
Right.
of it.
Right. And it's always been there. We've just brushed it under the rug, denied it exists. And now it's time to welcome everything home.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because in everything that just keeps on getting burped and vomited up to the surface, so many are finding their version of what it is that triggers them into righteousness and judgment, right? And that's usually the biggest message for yourself to say, oh, whoa, what am I judging? Right? As imperfect and needing to be fixed. And that's a tough one because we have things we've so deeply judged for so long, right?
Right. It's unconscious.
And we're blind to what it's showing us beyond that line, right? So it's like, I mean, and people come to me like, so, well, what about mass shootings and serial killers and pedophilia? You know, that's the whole thing now with the kids, and that's coming up, and you know, and human trafficking and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, look at all's coming to the surface that we're hiding from ourselves, right? Giving away, you know, creating victimhood situations to the nth degree, right?
Yep.
And, you know, I know you've said before when we've done this, what if we've never woken up from that, or we're not woken up? What if we've never left that situation where we created the darkness? What if we're like
we've
dreaming?
Just fooled ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, if I can just create all this light over here and stay over here, right?
And I don't have to look at this big, huge darkness. That's the exact opposite when we created.
Right. And the more you focus on the light,
the more you create the dark.
The more you create the dark.
That many just don't recognize. And it's like, when you recognize it's all perfect and it's all in the wholeness, it is that remembrance. And so, and that is truly taking away the line of friction. And maybe that's what we created this earth to be, to get to the key of what was to be created for the bigger project, well beyond this planet. And I think we alluded to that last week.
Right.
You know, that we did talk about this in Mount Shasta too, is that this is such a small piece of a much bigger project. And we are, as project managers, here to close it out.
Right. Right.
And so what if the earth ended? What if the whole solar system ended? What if this whole set of dimensions ended, and because it was done and complete, or we recognized the completion to move into something else?
Right. And there's lots of tools out there that help you get to a place of non-self-judgment. So if you can have your goal being getting to that place of non-self-judgment, and, you know, like you just said, so what if this? So what if this? So I used to do that all the time. Worst case scenario. How would I react to it? Am I going to die? All these different things. But everybody's got their own flavor of that, if you will. But the key is to bringing you back to yourself, bringing you back to that pure, authentic self. So you move forward without the burdens of the judgment and anything else, because that's the only way we're going to move forward.
Right. Right. And the key is to really pay attention to our own thoughts and words to begin with, right? So like Gloria's talking about, you know, the negative thoughts. That's what we've had so ingrained that we don't even recognize that they're there, right? So the biggest exercise is for everyone to simply observe it within themselves first, which is part of what we do in the Trinity One class anyway, is the self-love and working on the self-love and being observant of the judgments and criticisms, because if we're not observant of them, right, then we can't change them.
They're still unconscious.
And they're still controlling us, right?
Which the unconscious, I find, is more devious, because it's almost you are unaware of your behaviors and actions that are based from the unconscious.
Right. Right. So Nicole said, what if something really awesome is on the other side of the fear? Well, that's the whole thing. When we let go of the energy of the friction that we use to create all this stuff, the energy is so blissful. Yeah, Gloria, we'll get back to that in a second. The thing is that, you know, like how many things have you done on the other side of fear and been like, oh my God, that was awesome, right?
Right. And then you turn around and go, I can't believe how long I put this off and how I stood in my own way.
And you judge yourself. You judge yourself for having that fear to begin with, right?
Right.
And so that's the whole thing. It's like, oh, you know, I work with so many that I've worked with so many on looking at that and saying, okay, what if you just stop putting energy to this and it just happen? And I did have a period of time, and I think I said this in one of these podcasts, that I had a bunch of clients go through like their worst fears that I kept on having them voice or whatever. And then, yeah, of course there was an explosion. They were upset. And then
they moved beyond it.
And then they moved beyond it and they're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Now I just feel so relieved. Oh, so much less energy, because you're putting so much less energy to the fear, right? And then you're like, oh my God, this feels so much better. And just think, when we let go, that's why when we talk to those who've left the incarnation, they're so much happier, in general.
And don't live such a burdened life.
Yeah, because they got rid of all that energy that we put into creating this life, this, consciousness within the meat jacket kind of thing.
Right.
And kept it going, for X amount of years.
Right.
So, like when we look at that, and it's funny because there were there were things that we talked about, I know, in Mount Shasta, and I can't remember specifically what it was, but when like something came up and we're talking like, I remember a group of us and we looked at each other and we're like, yeah, God, that's just so much energy that I don't have to put into it anymore. So It's funny that, when you get on the far side of something that you used to put a lot of energy to, and you're like, oh, it's so much easier to trust.
Right. Well, and like Gloria says, unconscious seems to take so much energy from you. And that's why if you make the unconscious conscious by looking at those fears and going, no, not really.
And Gloria, that actually is what causes headaches too.
Yeah. Yeah.
The friction with the unconscious and the conscious. There's the friction again.
Yeah. Yep.
So Sarah too, because Sarah Mertz, who said she had a 3-day migraine or whatever, and they're having headaches, and that's the friction that's going on in the unconscious with the conscious, right?
Right.
Because a lot of people say, oh, I have headaches, but I don't have any stress. So that was my daughter. I don't know why I'd have a headache. Yeah, And then I was like, well. And the key is to start being conscious, like to commit ourselves to being conscious to our thoughts, because the more we're conscious of them, even the smallest whisper, and we observe them without judgment, then the more we bring forward from the unconscious so that we see it all, and then it's not controlling us like a puppet, or we don't allow it to control us like a puppet anymore, because that's what we've done.
Right. And my favorite quote is the Carl Jung quote that says that, those that continue to allow the unconscious, you call it fate. And that's that victimhood, is you're a victim to your own unconscious.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, we talk about free will and we talk about all that kind of stuff. Well, that all comes from that separation too, and that friction. Right. Because, I always laugh about that, because people talk about the free will thing and they ask me about that all the time too. And I'm like, well, the free will idea is an ego idea anyway.
Right.
And of course, we have the choice to do anything we want because we are the divine, and we do everything because we are the divine, and we have done it all and we do it all. So it's not like we make one choice or the other. So there is no
we even limit ourselves because of the divine.
Exactly. So there's no need for free will because we do all of it anyway.
Right.
It's just the will of where I am at this choice, in this moment, in this timeline, in this iteration, and this piece of me, and this whatever, So much bigger than a bread box. Going back to that. So the thing is to get to this place Oh, Gloria, we love you too. So the thing is to get to this place of saying, of recognizing the friction was the creation that we desired, right? And
Right.
so as we release the lines of the friction between attraction and repulsion, right? Or the
Right.
friction that is created in repulsion from attraction, right?
Right.
That we allow it to go. And that means we allow it to go.
It's shifting so much. I can almost
Yeah.
not talk.
And that we can do so with gratitude and
Right.
joy and bliss.
And that all-consuming love that's not even
Right.
unconditional, just doesn't even
Right. It doesn't even,
describe
no, it doesn't. It
it.
just, it's just, yeah. It's, and freedom,
Right.
freedom beyond anything we have talked about or can talk about or put words to, because you know that, and I've been present with those who've passed away, and it's like that last breath is almost like a freedom breath, like
Right.
I'm finally I'm leaving, I'm letting
Right.
go.
I can finally let go.
Yes.
Right. Yep.
So we do that within our lives, and as this is a collective energy share, the key is getting to the point of that when the moment comes in completion here, to be able to do that as well.
Right. And if you live every moment from that place of completion, you live so much more in that moment than you do in all those moments strung together that you're seeking whatever.
Yeah. Easy peasy lemon squeezy.
That's right. All on a Monday morning.
All on a Monday morning. All right. So let's, I guess, focus on whatever it is for us to all be there, right? To find that within ourselves, to remember that within ourselves, right? That presence and acceptance and the ease of completion,
Right.
and allow ourselves that ease of completion at all levels. All levels.
Oh, yeah.
That feels awesome.
That does.
All right, you ready? So anybody who hasn't listened or joined us before, and whether it's live or recorded, doesn't matter. You can just close your eyes, take a deep breath, be comfortable, and be willing to receive. Let's go.
got lost out there.
I did too. I was like, I have no idea how long we were out there. I was like, okay, time to come back. He was almost like, hello, hello, come on back. And I'm like, oh no, I feel so good out here.
Yeah.
Oh, Gloria said, this is so cool. I'm bouncing on fluffy clouds like a kid. And the song Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head is playing. That's cool.
In the very beginning, I had this interesting metaphor, I guess you'd say. Actually, I think it's actually pretty accurate. Is, when you're at the beach and you've got a wave, and that wave is part of the ocean, but it's kind of separated. And you don't see the wave going, no, 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 I don't want to go to the shore. I don't want to go to the shore, because then I just turn back into the ocean.
Right. Oh,
And
that's great. Yeah.
And it was just like, exactly, because that's its purpose.
Right. Right.
Do that and then return to the ocean and do it again.
Yep.
And I thought, yeah, we're all going, no, don't go to the shore. Don't go to the shore.
Stay away. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I just kept on seeing things start, and it was like so many layers. There's so many layers of friction, because there's the mental friction, there's physical friction, there's judgmental friction, there's all this kind of stuff. And it was like, oh, you erase this, and it was like, oh. And then it was like, oh, erase this, and it was like, oh. And it was just like so many layers. I talk about turning into jello. I was like, oh,
Right.
and it was like, then I was showing everybody around me to how to do that with themselves, and then like they were doing it, and then it was just like, and then we were collectively starting, and I was like, oh man, I could sit out here all day.
And that's how you get to that collective breath.
Right.
And it's just so freeing.
It was. It really was.
Like breathing for the first time again.
Well, that was a great way to start the week.
Highly recommend it.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. So this week, come back and do that again and again if you need to. I mean, that just felt fabulous. What a great thing to focus on in creation and meditation and stuff. Yeah. So, yeah, that would be the focus, and we'll see where we float to next week.
That's right.
So thank you for joining us. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni.
signing off with this week's Ascended World. Have a great one, everyone.